Rancher lived alone for years, until a wild Apache girl took his reins. Wild West love Elias Ward had lived alone for so long that the ranch felt like a living creature that knew his footsteps. The wind always came first, brushing the dry grass and the rough metal of the fence posts. Then came the soft hum of the solar panels waking up, the distant beep of a monitoring drone, and the low calls of the herd as they moved across the valley. This was not an old earth ranch, but Elias still called it that. It made sense in his head. He rode a sturdy hover saddle that floated a hand above the ground. He wore a wide hat with a dust scarf, and he carried a tool belt with a cutter, a rope, and a compact scanner. Some settlers laughed at his cowboy costume when he came into town, but they stopped laughing when they saw how well he handled the land. The animals were called grazers, built from biolabs long before Elias arrived. They were big, calm creatures with thick hides and slow hearts, made to survive harsh worlds. They fed on tough plants that normal cattle could not eat. The colony that created them had promised a future of steady food and strong trade. Then the colony failed. People moved away, governments changed, and the company that owned the land vanished into paperwork and silence. Elias stayed. He stayed because he did not trust new promises. He had trusted once. It had cost him too much. Each day he followed the same pattern. He checked the energy wire fences that kept the herd from wandering into storm zones. He repaired small machines himself instead of calling the nearest service hub. He cleaned his water filters, checked his fuel cells, and updated the old radio on the kitchen counter, even though it mostly carried static and distant voices. Then he rode out and counted his herd the old way, by sight, by habit, by memory. He talked to the animals sometimes, not because he believed they understood words, but because the sound of a human voice kept the emptiness from pressing too hard. His ranch house was small, built from prefab panels and reinforced stone. Inside, it was neat and plain. A table. A stove, 2 chairs, though he only used one. A wall with old maps and a faded photo of a younger Elias standing with a group of settlers, all smiling, all sure. He did not look at that photo often. Near sunset, the sky would turn copper, and the valley would glow with distant light from orbit, faint streaks like slow-moving stars. Elias would cook something simple and eat in silence. Then he would sit on the porch and listen to the land, letting the night settle around him like a blanket. That evening started the same until the ranch alarm broke the quiet. A sharp alert flashed across his wrist screen. Fence line 3, breach detected. Elias stood so fast his chair scraped the floor. He grabbed his jacket, his scanner, and his side tool cutter, then stepped outside. The air smelled like dust and metal, as if the world had been waiting to send trouble. He rode out under the darkening sky, his hover saddle floating smoothly over rough ground. Fence line 3 ran along a shallow ridge near a canyon. The wind there could be strange, pulling at sound and making the night feel closer than it should. When he reached the fence, he saw the problem immediately. A clean cut, not storm damage, not an animal crash. Someone had sliced the energy wire and pulled 2 support posts out of place. The break was wide enough for a grazer to slip through. Elias frowned and scanned the ground. Tracks, not heavy, not made by animals. They were human but careful, placed with skill, almost like the person wanted to leave as little sign as possible. He followed the tracks toward the canyon. The land dipped and narrowed. The shadows grew long. His scanner picked up a faint heat trace ahead, but it was moving fast, then stopping, then moving again. Elias slowed. His hand hovered near his belt. He did not like surprises. He had survived by avoiding them. A low sound came from below, half a call, half a grunt. One of the grazers, a young one, stood near the canyon edge, nervous and confused. Its ear tag blinked weakly. It had wandered through the breach and got and turned around. Elias clicked his tongue softly and started to guide it back. But before he could step closer, the animal calmed suddenly, as if it sensed something else nearby. Then he saw her. She stood on a rock ledge a short distance away, watching him without fear. She was young, maybe early 20s, but her eyes held a sharp calm that made her seem older. Her dark hair was braided and tied with thin bands. Her clothing was layered, a cloak of rough, woven fabric over a fitted suit designed for travel, with patches that looked hand-stitched. She carried a small pack, no visible weapon, but Elias knew better than to assume that meant harmless. The night wind tugged at her cloak. She did not move, as if she and the canyon were part of the same thing. Elias kept his voice steady. "You cut my fence." Her gaze did not flicker. Yes, no denial, no excuses, just truth. Elias felt a spark of anger, but he forced it down. Why? She glanced toward the young grazer. It was walking into storm ground. I turned it back. Elias looked at the animal again. He noticed something else then. The ear tag had been repaired. The blinking light was stronger now, stable, as if someone had fixed its signal. Elias had not done that. He looked back at her. You could have come to the house. She tilted her head slightly. You live alone for a reason. People say you do not like visitors. People, so she had heard of him. Elias did not like that. Who are you? He asked. She paused like she was deciding how much to give. My name is Nia. The name was simple, but the way she said it carried weight. Elias had heard other names whispered on radio channels. Nomad clans, old Earth bloodlines that refused corporate rule. Groups that traveled outside mapped zones and lived on their own terms. Some settlers called them raiders, some called them ghosts. Elias had always called them none of his business. Nia stepped down from the ledge and moved closer, slow and open, her hands visible. A storm is coming, she said. A real one, not just wind. Elias checked the sky. He could see a faint, bruised line on the horizon, like darkness building itself into a wall. His weather system had warned him earlier, but it had not shown anything extreme. Still, he had learned the land could surprise even good machines. You need shelter, he said, more as a statement than a question. Yes, Nia answered. Elias hesitated. If he let her in, he broke his own rule. No strangers, no ties, no reasons to stay awake wondering what someone might do while he slept. But if he turned her away and the storm hit hard, he would not forgive himself. He might not like people, but he was not cruel. He nodded once. Come. They walked back toward the ranch with the young grazer moving safely behind the fence again. Nia followed at a distance, scanning the land with sharp eyes. Elias noticed she moved like someone who knew how to avoid trouble, but also how to face it if needed. When they reached the ranch house, the wind had picked up. Dust swirled around the porch light. Elias opened the door and stepped inside first, then let her enter. Nia stood quietly in the doorway, taking in the room. Her eyes moved over the tools on the shelf, the water purifier, the old maps, the worn saddle leaning against the wall. She did not touch anything, but her attention was intense, like she was reading the space. Elias poured water into a metal cup and handed it to her. She accepted with a small nod. Thank you, he pointed to the spare chair. Sit if you want. She sat, but not heavily. Ready to rise, ready to move. The first thunder rolled far away, deep and slow. The house lights flickered as the wind hammered the outer panels. Elias checked his battery system and reinforced the window locks, then turned back to see Nia watching him. You fix everything yourself, she said. It's cheaper, Elias replied. She almost smiled as if she knew that was not the full reason. The storm hit hard within minutes. The world outside became a wall of dust and lightning. The ranch house shook. Elias stayed calm, moving through his routine, sealing vents, checking emergency power, making sure the water tank was safe. Nia did not panic. She watched the storm like it was an old enemy she respected. As the night deepened, Elias realized something else. The fence breach had been too clean, too skilled, and the grazer's ear tag had been repaired with careful hands. Nia had not come to steal. She had come for a reason, but not a greedy one. Still, why him? Why this ranch? Elias leaned against the counter and studied her. You didn't answer everything, he said. Nia met his gaze. You didn't ask everything. The thunder cracked again, closer this time. In the flash of light, Elias saw a faint scar along her cheek, old and healed. He wondered what kind of life put that mark on someone so young. Outside, the storm screamed. Inside, the rancher and the so-called wild girl sat in a tense, quiet peace, each measuring the other, each feeling something change that neither of them had planned. Elias did not know it yet, but the night was not just a storm shelter. It was the start of a new story. The storm lasted through the night, shaking the ranch house like an angry ocean. Dust struck the walls in heavy waves, and the wind screamed across the valley with a voice that sounded almost alive. Inside, the air felt warm and still, filled with the quiet tension of two strangers sharing space. Elias woke early, even though he had slept lightly. Years of living alone had trained him to wake at every strange sound. For a moment, he forgot someone else was there. Then he saw Nia sitting near the window, watching the fading storm. She had not slept much either. The sky outside was slowly clearing, streaks of pale orange breaking through dark clouds. The valley looked different after storms. Tracks disappeared, rocks shifted, and sometimes the land revealed things hidden before. You stay awake all night? Elias asked. Nia turned slightly. Mostly, I listen when storms speak. Elias raised an eyebrow but did not question it. People survived in different ways. He moved toward the kitchen and started heating water. Soon the smell of simple morning tea filled the room. You're quiet, she said. I work better that way, he replied. She nodded as if she understood more than he said. After eating, Elias stepped outside to check the damage. The ground felt heavier under his boots. Dust coated everything and some of the solar panels were half buried. Fence line 3 would need full repair. The herd moved slowly in the distance, unsettled but safe. Nia followed him outside, pulling her cloak tighter against the cold morning wind. She looked across the valley, her eyes scanning the horizon like a tracker searching for signs. You will need help, she said calmly. I manage, Elias answered automatically. She did not argue. Instead, she walked toward the damaged fence without waiting for permission. Elias watched as she examined the broken wire, the torn posts, and the sand patterns around them. You fixed the grazer's ear tag, he said. Yes. How? She shrugged lightly. I know machines. And animals? Elias noticed her movements were precise, confident. She handled the tools he gave her without hesitation. Together, they started repairing the fence, working mostly in silence. The quiet felt comfortable, not awkward. As they worked, Elias began to notice small things. Nia hummed softly when she concentrated. She moved quickly but never rushed. She seemed to understand the rhythm of the ranch after only one night. You travel alone? Elias asked after a while. Sometimes, she said. My people move together, but paths cross and separate. My people, Elias repeated. Apache, she nodded once. Descendants, we keep some old ways, but we also learn new ones. Elias had heard stories from traders about clans who refused corporate cities and built lives across wild planets. Many settlers called them wild or dangerous. Watching Nia work calmly beside him, he felt those labels were too simple. By midday, they finished repairing the fence. Elias expected her to leave after that. Instead, she walked toward the ranch house and began organizing tools without asking. She moved as if she belonged there but never crossed any line of respect. Storm changed the wind patterns, she said, pointing toward the north ridge. You will have more dust moving this way now. Elias checked his weather map and realized she was right. His system had not updated yet, but the land itself told her what machines could not. You read the land, he said. She gave a small smile. The land reads us too. Later that afternoon, a distant hum echoed across the sky. Elias froze. That sound did not belong to storms or animals. A sleek survey drone appeared on the horizon, moving slowly over the valley. Its scanning lights flickered across the ground. Elias felt tension tighten in his chest. Corporate scouts, he muttered. Nia watched silently. They come often? Not here, Elias said. Not until now. The drone passed overhead, scanning the herd, the fences, the ranch house. Elias resisted the urge to wave it away. That would only attract more attention. Nia's expression grew serious. They look for resources. They won't find much, Elias replied. She shook her head slightly. They always find something. The drone left, disappearing beyond the ridge. Silence returned, but it felt different now, heavier. That evening, Elias sat on the porch while Nia prepared food inside without being asked. The simple act felt strange. He had cooked alone for years. Hearing someone move in his kitchen made the house feel less empty. You don't talk about your past, she said gently when she joined him outside. He hesitated. Not much to say. That usually means there is a lot to say, she replied. Elias stared at the horizon for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. I lived in a colony once, big one, promised stability, community. Then politics changed. People fought over resources. Friends stopped trusting each other. He paused. I left before it got worse. Nia listened quietly, not interrupting. After that, he continued, I decided land and animals made more sense than people. She considered his words carefully. And now, he glanced at her. Now I have a stranger fixing my fences. A faint smile touched her face. Night fell gently. The stars appeared brighter after storms. Elias felt something unfamiliar, a calm that came from shared silence rather than isolation. The next morning brought new trouble. A ground vehicle approached from the south, raising dust as it crossed the valley. Elias grabbed his binoculars and felt his stomach drop. Corporate markings covered the vehicle's sides. They came fast, he said. Nia stood beside him. They already decided something about this place. The vehicle stopped near the ranch house. Two figures stepped out wearing clean uniforms, their boots untouched by dust. They looked around with polite curiosity that felt fake. Elias walked forward slowly. Nia stayed behind him, but close enough to act if needed. One of the visitors smiled professionally. "Mr. Ward, we represent Frontier Resource Development. We are conducting a regional survey. This land may hold valuable mineral deposits." Elias kept his voice steady. "This is private grazing land." "Of course," the man said smoothly, "but rights change." "We wanted to introduce ourselves before further activity." Elias felt anger rising but forced himself to remain calm. "You introduced yourselves, now leave." The visitors exchanged glances, amused but not offended. "We will return soon," the second one said before stepping back into the vehicle. As the vehicle drove away, dust trailing behind it like a warning, Elias exhaled slowly. "They will come again," Nia said. "I know," he answered. Silence settled between them, heavier now with shared understanding. Elias realized the ranch was no longer hidden. Something had changed, and it would not return to the quiet life he knew. Nia looked at him carefully. "You can face this alone," she said softly, "but you do not have to." Elias met her gaze. For the first time in years, he did not immediately choose solitude. He nodded slowly. "Then we plan." Under the wide alien sky, the rancher who once lived only by routine began preparing for something new, not just protecting land, but trusting another person to stand beside him. Morning came with a heavy silence that felt different from the calm Elias had known for years. The valley still looked the same, wide land stretching under a pale sky, the herd moving slowly through tall, dry grass, the ranch house standing strong against the wind. But something had changed. The visit from the corporate scouts had left an invisible mark. Elias stood near the fence, checking the energy wires again even though he had repaired them the day before. Habit helped him think. Every small movement gave him time to process what was coming. Nia approached quietly, carrying a bundle of tools. She watched him work for a moment before speaking. "You are preparing," she said. "I always prepare," Elias replied. "Yes," she said gently, "but today you prepare for people, not storms." Elias stopped and leaned against a fence post. "Storms follow rules, people don't." She nodded slightly, understanding. They returned to the ranch house and spread maps across the table. Some were digital projections, others old paper maps marked with faded ink. Elias had drawn grazing paths, water sources, and natural barriers over years of living there. Nia studied everything carefully. "This ridge," she said, pointing toward the northern hills. "Strong wind currents after storms, machines may struggle there." Elias looked at her with interest. "You thinking defense?" "I think balance," she replied. "Slow them down. Make them think twice." Elias had never fought corporations before. He avoided conflict whenever possible. But leaving the ranch was not an option. This land had become part of him. They began planning small adjustments, nothing aggressive, just smart. Elias reprogrammed his monitoring drones to move unpredictably instead of in simple patterns. Nia suggested hiding extra energy relays beneath rocks to keep systems running even if someone tried to shut down power. Working together felt natural. Elias noticed how quickly she adapted to his routines. She asked questions when needed but trusted his knowledge of the land. During a break, Nia stepped outside and sat on the porch, watching the herd. Elias joined her with 2 cups of tea. "You always look at them," she said, nodding toward the grazers. "They're steady," Elias replied. "They don't pretend to be something else." Nia smiled softly. "People also want to be steady, they just forget how." Elias thought about that longer than he expected. The peaceful moment ended when a loud hum echoed from above. 2 survey drones passed overhead, slower this time, scanning with bright beams. One paused directly above the ranch house. Elias clenched his jaw. "They're mapping everything." Nia watched quietly. "Then we show them only what we choose." She walked inside and adjusted the drone interference system Elias had installed years ago for storms. With a few changes, the scanners began receiving distorted signals, nothing harmful, just confusing enough to make accurate mapping difficult. Elias raised an eyebrow. "You know systems better than you said." "I learn from many worlds," she answered simply. That evening they rode together across the valley to check water stations. Elias felt strange sharing his routine. For years, riding alone had been peaceful. Now the silence between them felt alive instead of empty. Nia rode with perfect balance, guiding her hover saddle like someone born to it. She noticed small tracks on the ground and pointed them out, not from animals but from machines that had passed during the night. "They already test boundaries," she said. Elias felt anger rising again. "They think no one fights back." Nia turned toward him. "Then we remind them this land has guardians." The word surprised him. Guardians. He had never thought of himself that way. He was just a rancher trying to survive. They returned home under a sky full of bright stars. Elias cooked while Nia repaired a damaged drone. The sound of her tools clicking softly felt comforting. Later that night, she shared more about her past. Her clan traveled between frontier worlds, protecting lands threatened by corporations or careless settlers. They believed land was not something to own completely, but something to respect. "My people taught me to listen first," she said. "Conflict comes when listening stops." Elias nodded slowly. "I stopped listening a long time ago." She studied him gently. "Maybe you just stopped listening to people who hurt you." He did not answer, but he did not deny it either. The next morning brought direct confrontation. 3 ground vehicles approached, larger than before. Workers stepped out, placing markers into the soil near the valley edge. Elias watched from the porch, anger and worry mixing inside him. "They move fast," he said. Nia stood beside him. "Then we move smarter." They walked out to meet the workers. One of the corporate representatives greeted them with a polite smile that did not reach his eyes. "We are beginning preliminary measurements," he said. "All activities are within legal rights." Elias crossed his arms. "You're too close to my grazing area." The man checked a tablet. "Temporary adjustments may be necessary." Nia stepped forward slightly. Her voice remained calm but strong. "Your machines disturb migration paths. That breaks environmental protection codes." The man hesitated, surprised by her knowledge. "We are aware of regulations." "Then follow them," she replied. The workers exchanged looks, unsure how to respond. After a brief discussion, they moved their markers slightly farther away, but Elias knew it was only temporary. As the vehicles left, Elias felt a strange mix of pride and relief. "You speak like a leader," he said. She shrugged lightly. "I speak like someone who refuses to be ignored." Over the next days, they worked harder than ever. They created natural barriers using rocks and old irrigation channels, guiding wind and sand to make certain areas difficult for machines. Elias taught Nia more about ranch systems, and she taught him how to observe patterns he had never noticed. Slowly, something deeper grew between them, trust built through shared work and quiet understanding. One evening, while watching the sunset, Elias realized he had laughed earlier that day. He could not remember the last time he had done that. "You changed the ranch," he said suddenly. Nia shook her head. "You changed it. I only helped you see more." He looked at her, feeling something warm and unfamiliar, but the peaceful moment did not last. A message arrived on Elias' old radio, a formal notice from Frontier Resource Development. They planned to bring heavy excavation equipment within days. Negotiation options were listed, along with relocation offers. Elias stared at the message, anger burning inside him. "They want to buy you," Nia said quietly. "They want to erase me," he replied. Silence settled between them, but it was not empty. It felt like the calm before a storm. Elias turned toward her. "If this gets dangerous, you should leave." Nia met his gaze without hesitation. "I came here for a reason. I do not run when things become difficult." He felt a deep respect for her courage. That night they worked late, preparing new strategies. They planned ways to slow machines without harming anyone, using the land itself as an ally. As Elias lay down to sleep, he realized something important. For years he had lived to avoid loss and pain. Now he was willing to risk both to protect his home and to protect the person who had brought life back into it. Outside, the wind moved softly through the grass, carrying the promise of change across the endless frontier. The message from Frontier Resource Development echoed in Elias' mind long after the radio fell silent. Heavy excavation equipment would arrive within 3 days. The notice was written in calm, polite language, but the meaning was clear. The valley was no longer just land. It was profit in someone else's eyes. Elias stood outside before sunrise, staring across the open plains. The herd grazed peacefully, unaware that their world might soon be torn apart by machines. The wind moved softly through the grass, almost gentle, as if the land itself was waiting. Nia joined him quietly. She had tied her hair back tighter than usual, ready for work. "They want to force speed," she said. Yes, Elias replied. They think pressure makes people break. Nia looked at him carefully. Will you? Elias shook his head slowly. Not this time. That answer surprised even him. The next 2 days were filled with preparation. Elias adjusted his drones again, programming them to track every machine that entered the valley. Nia worked on something more complex. She modified the old irrigation tunnels that ran under the northern ridge. Long ago, settlers had built them to move water during heavy rains. Now they would guide wind and sand. Sand is patient, she explained. Machines are not. They did not build traps meant to harm anyone. They built obstacles meant to delay, confuse, and protect. Wind sensors were placed strategically. Energy relays were hidden beneath rock clusters. Elias even unlocked old communication channels he had avoided for years, preparing to broadcast if needed. On the third morning, the ground began to shake. The first excavation unit appeared over the ridge, massive and metallic, moving like a slow beast across the valley. Behind it followed 2 support vehicles and several smaller drones hovering above. Elias felt his heartbeat rise, but he remained steady. Nia stood beside him, calm and focused. Remember, she said softly, we act with balance. The machines rolled closer, their engines humming loudly. A corporate supervisor stepped out from one of the vehicles, holding a digital tablet and wearing the same polite smile Elias had grown to dislike. We begin today, the supervisor called out. Final notice was delivered. Elias stepped forward. You're too close to protected grazing routes. The supervisor barely glanced up. Temporary inconvenience. Nia activated the first part of their plan. Hidden wind sensors sent signals to the irrigation tunnels. Panels beneath the ridge opened slightly, guiding air pressure into narrow channels. The morning breeze, which had seemed harmless, suddenly strengthened as it was redirected through the terrain. Within minutes, dust began to swirl around the excavation unit. Not a violent storm, but thick enough to limit visibility. The machine slowed. The supervisor frowned, checking his equipment. Increase stability controls, he ordered. Elias activated the second step. His drones rose quietly into the sky, releasing small electromagnetic pulses calibrated to disrupt sensors without damaging hardware. The excavation unit paused completely, its screens flickering. What is this? The supervisor demanded, clearly irritated now. Environmental interference, Nia answered calmly. The dust thickened, swirling in controlled patterns along the ridge. The machines struggled to adjust. Their sensors displayed inconsistent terrain data, forcing operators to halt progress. Elias felt a spark of satisfaction, but he knew this was only the beginning. The supervisor moved toward them, anger replacing his polite tone. You are interfering with authorized operations. We are protecting environmental balance, Nia replied firmly. Your mapping ignores storm shifts and wildlife movement. That violates frontier codes. The supervisor hesitated again. Frontier environmental codes were complex and often ignored, but they existed for a reason. Elias activated his final measure, broadcasting live environmental readings through the open communication channels. Data flowed not only to corporate servers, but also to public frontier networks. Independent observers began to respond almost immediately, requesting clarification about excavation plans during unstable weather cycles. The supervisor's expression changed. You filed reports. Just sharing facts, Elias said evenly. The dust continued swirling and the excavation unit remained stalled. The corporation could push forward, but now it would face scrutiny. Hours passed in tense silence. Finally, the supervisor stepped back into his vehicle, speaking sharply into his communicator. One by one, the support vehicles powered down. We are suspending activity pending review, he announced stiffly. The excavation unit slowly reversed, retreating toward the ridge. The drones followed. Elias did not celebrate. He simply watched until the machines disappeared beyond the horizon. The valley grew quiet again. For a long moment, neither he nor Nia spoke. It will not end forever, Elias said at last. No, she agreed, but today the land breathes. He looked around at the herd, at the ranch house, at the wide open sky. Something inside him felt lighter than it had in years. They returned to the porch as the sun began to lower. The dust settled slowly, leaving golden light across the plains. You were ready to stand alone, Nia said gently, but you did not have to, Elias nodded. I forgot that strength grows when shared. She studied him carefully. My clan will move soon. We follow shifting paths. The words struck him harder than any corporate threat. He had known this moment would come. Nia did not belong to one place. You'll leave, he said quietly. For a time, she answered. Movement is part of who we are. Elias stared at the horizon, thinking about the man he had been before she arrived, silent, guarded, closed. He had built walls stronger than his fences. Now those walls felt thinner. You changed this place, he said. Nia shook her head gently. You allowed change. That evening they rode together across the valley one more time, checking fences and water stations under a sky painted with deep red and gold. The herd moved calmly around them. Elias felt something steady growing in his chest, not fear, not loneliness, but hope. The next morning, Nia prepared her pack. She stood near the canyon where they had first met. My path circles back, she said. Nothing in the frontier moves in a straight line. Elias stepped closer. This ranch will be here, she met his gaze. Then I will find it again. There were no dramatic words, no promises written in stone, just quiet understanding. Nia mounted her hover saddle and rode toward the open land, her figure growing smaller against the wide horizon. Elias stood watching until she disappeared beyond the ridge. The valley felt quiet again, but not empty. He returned to the ranch house and looked at the second chair near the table. For the first time, it did not feel useless. It felt like a place waiting. Days passed, and news spread through frontier networks. The corporation faced investigation. Environmental protections were strengthened. The valley received temporary protected status. Elias continued his work, checking fences, riding with the herd, repairing machines, but he moved differently now. He listened more closely, not only to wind and animals, but to the world beyond his ranch. Sometimes, at sunset, he would ride toward the canyon and pause where he had first seen her standing on the rock ledge. The rancher who once lived alone still valued silence, but he no longer hid inside it. Under the endless alien sky, the land remained wide and wild. And somewhere beyond the horizon, a rider followed her path, knowing that one day their trails would cross again.